This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gyro Drilling. They provide world-class drilling solutions for all types of projects. They specialise in auger, aircore and RC drilling. Head to the team at Gyro Drilling for all your mining needs and see how they can help you with your upcoming project. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. As this podcast grows, every subscriber helps. From those of you who watch this on YouTube or to those that listen on Spotify and Apple, every follower helps. If you do this one favour and hit follow on whatever platform you find us on, I promise I will continue to look and find fascinating people across the world and bring their perspectives to you. Thank you and enjoy this episode. So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. Joining me in the studio today is Brad Valiukas, the Managing Director of Aurumin Limited, which is listed on the ASX under code AUN. Many are familiar with it. It's an early stage exploration and mining company, and yeah, it's first time for Brad on the show, so welcome, Brad.
Ben, great to talk today and have a long conversation.
Yeah, we are going to go through a fair bit. There's been a lot of activity, particularly to the back end of last year and now into 2024. But I want to get to know a little bit about your history in the mining scene. This is a new role. You've been predominantly operations and hands-on focused and now in a managing director position. What's your history in the mining world and how did it lead you to where you are now?
Yeah, Ben, so 25 years mining one way or another. So University of New South Wales, so Sydney boy originally. Most of my early exposure was to coal mining. First mine I ever went underground was coal mining, and you sort of think you'll end up there. By the time you get to the end of uni, 3D underground metals is much more exciting. So went up to Queensland, worked as a contractor, bulk copper gold projects, large excavations. I think probably still the biggest I've worked at in my time. Came across to WA theoretically for a short bit of time and ended up sort of staying over here for 10 years, floated around some gold operations, Plutonic, Lawlers, Gidgee, and a little bit of nickel in that time as well. But, Plutonic, I think, had gone underground. It's a bit of a basket case, to be honest. And, a little of that contracting background, simplifying things, this is what we need to do. So I actually got Plutonic underground profitable. I think, a lot to do with that. Gidgee there when Peter Cook listed it, so when we get to sort of where Aurumin is, some of that early exposure to corporate, although I had nothing to do with the corporate side of it.
Yeah, that's what I made.
You could sort of see it from a distance and you know how much they paid for it and you know how much or how little involvement anybody externally to the business did it, and then you know the sort of changes you made there at an operation. And so it was good fun. It's always something I'd like to get the benefit from at some stage. Went off, worked overseas in Ireland for a while, again, just as a contractor, so really working holiday, sedimentary lead zinc project outside of Dublin, back to Australia and sort of got into the management side. So came back, ended up starting with a company called Misson Resources, started up Red Ross, which is actually really satisfying because some of the IP going into there, changing mining methods was result of what I'd done, a little bit of contract time for Western Mining with Ian Junk when he'd motivated Mincor to buy in. That was, my IP about how we should change the mining methods from a little bit of exposure in Kambalda previously. So sort of walking into that, so did that as owner mining, as the owner, and then eventually went back there and converted back to owner mining as well. So got rid of the contractor, went owner mining there. So 8 years on and off with Mincor. So start up Red Ross, involvement with all of those south of Widgie operations there, south of Kambalda. Started up Carnegie Hill, a lot of involvement in the startup, restarted McMahon, was there over the time, and a few other things. So started on site as an underground manager, sort of finished at the end in Perth in a sort of more technical business development role. Back to gold after that, Focus Minerals. Went there, sort of end of the GFC. Nickel was doing pretty tough. It was time to make a bit of a move. Went back to gold. We did pretty well there for a while. Tough ore body though, super low grade, and I guess eventually ran out of meaningful things to mine. A couple other things, and so ended up at Northern Star for 5 years. Perth based, I guess ran the big part of the technical side of that business, was manager of tech services. So, at that stage, the guys had picked up most of the assets. I guess we're really trying to make them work. So in terms of shuffling around a little bit, I guess how those operations were approached and how we treated them. A lot of really good expertise in-house already at Northern Star there in terms of mining and that contract background. Maybe sort of added some of that client mix in terms of where the hole should go and how we should be approaching things overall there. And so, great period of growth.
Far. I mean, that's an extensive career in all different facets of mining in Australia and globally. And then going more so, I mean, a lot of people are familiar with Northern Star as one of the biggest gold producers and companies around the world. And I think that name, everyone recognises it. And then more so recently, 2020 was the year that it listed. And of course, you would have been introduced to Aurumin either through conversations or just, your time at Northern Star. But how did that journey start to unfold and take on that opportunity?
So the origin of Aurumin is actually from before Northern Star. So we actually, with some other people, about 5 of us, we had a crack at buying a project in the US called Jerritt Canyon. It was a 200,000 ounce producer. Australian dollar was on parity with the US at that time. Gold price was about $1,000 an ounce, and it was just losing a little bit of money. But some super low-hanging fruit there and a great opportunity to improve. And we got very, very close with the administrator there, just sort of dotting I's, crossing T's, and Eric Sprott sort of came in over the top and offered more than we could, and we lost it. But we got so close. So, had we done that, I never would have gone to Northern Star and would have put the effort into
different trajectory
altogether. With one of those guys, I guess I gave him a bit of a hand to pick up the assets at Mount Dimer while I was still at Northern Star, and I guess 5 years there it was time to move on and do something else. I guess the business had grown to such a point it had changed a little bit, for the better and the growth and everything's good, but so usually a bit more hands on and it was starting to get pulled apart. So opportunity to get back in and sort of really focus on something a little bit earlier stage was the opportunity. The market seemed to be picking up and it was a good chance to try and take those assets to market and list Aurumin. So no different to sort of where we were at Jerritt Canyon to some degree. We're trying to build a mining company and a mining operation, and that stayed with us right throughout everything we've done. Is the intent to turn Aurumin into a mining company. We're not quite where we'd like to be yet, but still the aspiration hasn't changed, and I think the opportunity is still there, and we keep pushing forward to that. So I guess that was 3 years ago. There was the assets at Mount Dimer, and we sort of built up that Southern Cross portfolio, and so new exposure for me going through the IPO process, and all very good and rewarding in terms of education. We got it out. Some cracking individual results at Mount Dimer. Didn't get there in terms of where we'd like to for expansion. Brought in Sandstone as a slightly nearer term development opportunity for pouring gold bars, and I guess that's really mostly where we are at the moment.
Yeah, well, we'll shine a spotlight now on Aurumin, just to paint the picture of, you alluded to there, a mining exploration company and potentially in the future going towards the mining stage. But for those that are unfamiliar with, I guess, the company's mission and what it's focused on, you just mentioned a few things, but what is Aurumin Limited?
So we are that advanced exploration. So we're not out there looking for greenfields activity. The vision is to be a multi-asset producer. Right? That's where we are. When we picked up Sandstone, it's always something we expect to do in parallel with Dimer. The last couple of years been super tough for gold juniors, and I guess we were unable to support that. And I talk about, we've made some changes to the portfolio during that time, but overall that hasn't changed. We continue to work on how we progress Sandstone to development. Some clear targets we need to get out there and work on at the moment. Need to grow that. We're still open towards other projects at the same time, so long as it fits that company mentality of multi-asset operations.
Yeah, well, we'll pull on the thread of the Mount Dimer because that was the recent activity that happened late December and a little bit into this year. And for those that are unfamiliar, that was, as you talked about, probably one of the starting foundations of Aurumin. And as it's evolved and changed, these decisions are made at the board and the organisational level. So talk to us a little bit about the diversification of that and really offsetting or selling that asset to Beacon Mining. And there's a few other, involvements from Mineral Resources as well. Can you talk us a little bit about those transactions?
Yeah, so after picking up Sandstone, we had the assets of Southern Cross, we had the assets of Sandstone. As part of picking up Sandstone, we picked up convertible notes. So as I touched on, the last couple of years for gold juniors has certainly been tough. Early last year, said we're going to try and push Diamond towards production. A couple of very small high-grade resources there, Lightning and Golden Slipper deposits. Like I said, some great individual drilling results there. Technically, from exploration, we hit a lot of structures where we expected to, but in terms of looking for repeats, etc. But we just didn't pick up the grade in a lot of those. We did have a new discovery at T12, which came up okay, and I'm pretty sure Beacon will mine that now and make some good money out of it. But yeah, so we were there and certainly there still to do. So the market wouldn't support
two operations simultaneously.
Yeah, trying to take Diamond to production, carrying the convertible note in the meantime, and trying to keep advancing Sandstone. Yeah. So effectively, we had to roll together the convertible note and the Mount Diamond. So we've divested Mount Diamond, the mining tenements themselves, to Beacon Minerals, and that's basically closed out or come close to closing out the convertible note. So we have a little bit left, but it's cash backed at the moment, and that'll fall away in the very near future. At the same time, we've got a decent exploration package around there. So we've done a deal with MinRes that's still in progress at the moment to divest, or we have selling the iron ore rights on those tenements. There's still some gold potential there, but MinRes picked up the iron ore. There's the Carina iron ore mine there that's operated a couple of times over the years. It's hematite DSO. They've got Railhead sort of to the south there. They've got a couple other deposits up to the north, and we've got sort of all the ground in and around that and connecting those. And there's some reasonable potential there, and MinRes are quite keen to continue to advance that area. We'll do the exploration on MinRes' behalf, so we'll sort of become sort of a management group out of that. We'll pick up a fee for doing that, as well as obviously fees for selling the iron ore rights, and there's some other progress payments there, and we pick up $1 per tonne royalty at the end of it as well. And I should say from Mount Diamond, above 12,000 ounces, we also pick up 2% on any of the gold, so we're certainly still exposed to the upside there with some success. So yeah, so that sort of simplifies our portfolio a lot, because I guess that was the other main area of focus. Earlier last year, we sold our Aurumin project, which was really sort of early stage, and we hadn't done enough work on it between Coogati and Kalgoorlie. A little bit of lithium potential down there. It's not too far from Mount Marion, or it sits off on a different granite. And so MinRes were pretty keen. They picked that up as well off us. And now we've only really got the Mount Palmer project left in the Southern Cross, and I think I disclose in presentations that we're thinking about what our options are there now, and yeah, so we're still thinking about what our options are.
Yeah, no. When I was watching that all unfold, I was like, again, when I was looking on the website, there was a lot of projects and packages, and I remember when I first reached out to you, said that I'd come back to me in the new year because you were going through some discussions, and then inevitably I did see it all unfold, and I was like, oh, that's a reason behind it. So it really does focus a lot of the attention on Sandstone and some of the evolving, I guess, plans and operations that are happening there. So where is that project? And even thinking out loud now, prioritising that must mean that you see quite a bit more value naturally for shareholders in the long term with that project. So can you talk to a little bit about why that is so exciting, and where it is and what's unfolding there?
Yeah, so it'll be great this year. So we'll get to attack Sandstone effectively with a clean balance sheet and a very deliberate focus there, and not distracted by anything else. So Sandstone, 946,000 ounces of overall resource, 881,000 ounces up in Sandstone. We think that area in general is just massively underdone. We've got some legacy infrastructure there, the previous 500,000 tonne per annum process plant, camp infrastructure in town, a little bit of tails capacity, left, roads, water, all the good stuff you need to get going. So there's really good option there to restart. There's a good resource base. Reasonable amount of that resource base is underground, so I do want to add to the open pits there right now, but it's just sort of asking for it to sort of be restarted. Like, it's so it seems so far away in some respects, but it's also so close because there's so much already there, the existing resource base. We've got the targets there sitting on the mining leases. We've got a growing tenement footprint with plenty of potential as well. So it's just a matter of time and getting out and doing the amount of work that we would like to do on that project. So it's trying to nail that open pit. I've got a target that I'm trying to hit in terms of a starting inventory for open pits at a certain cash price. And we're not quite there yet, but I think the potential is certainly on our mining leases to hit that, and then we sort of start to transform the company from that late stage exploration, trying to fill a gap, to we really are into development and getting it up and going.
Yeah, you mentioned there about the history of the area and a lot of the infrastructure that already was set and just needs a little bit to get up and going again. Do you have a bit of indication as to what was unfolding, as to why some of that has gone on and then, I guess, been left and neglected? Because that's the other fascinating side of, if it's timing and it just wasn't the right time for the previous owners and stuff like that. What's the history of that area?
Yeah, so I don't even think it was necessarily just wasn't the right time for the previous owner. So maybe Middle Island just before us, but if I go back, so Troy Resources had it previously. They put in the plant that's there now, and that's the mining leases that we have were theirs. Gold price, talking about where around, I was up at Gidgee just to the north. We were mining gold price $300 an ounce. Troy were down there just really focused on the oxide. I think exhausted some of that material that they knew about. Not that there wasn't still plenty of other targets there to go and test. They were focused elsewhere as well. That projects in South America they were trying to push along with. I think just changing focus, change of intent, low gold price. It sort of just it wound up at that time. Didn't happen. Not unlike a bunch of projects around WA at that time. Gold price was tough, and so just even if the targets are there, people just didn't have the money to go out and keep exploring and keep testing and sort of keep going. You sort of get into that hand-to-mouth situation where you don't have enough in front of you, so you start to not justify more exploration to keep it going, especially when you've got another project that you start to focus
prioritise and focus. Yeah.
There's been a couple of milling operations in Sandstone before that over the years. It's like a lot of the goldfields. Some of the tenements we've got some old tails. In fact, I think we've got two lots of old tailings now, one from an old stamp battery, one from near one of the deposits called Wirramina. There's sort of the old hospital hill. There's a little old town site there. There's been some previous mining history through there as well. So it's a prospective region, but it's just massively underdone by modern standards. We've picked up tenements where just no soil sampling, a little bit of soil sampling, but we've got a guy going back consistently through the old handwritten reports, because the cheapest exploration you can do is the ones that's already been done. That's already been done, even if someone else hasn't spent the time before. So you've still got big portions just with no decent geochem in sandstone, and known deposits and good prospectivity, and plenty of opportunity remaining. But also so close to the target that we need to get it going.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a fair bit of excitement in your voice as well about what's unfolding over the next 12 months. And Sandstone, there's a few areas of interest, but you've got a few other projects as well in the surrounding area than throughout WA. So do you mind going through a little bit about what else is in the entire ecosystem of Aurumin?
Yeah, so as I said, we end up with the royalties and the iron ore exploration down to the South Mount Palmer. We're looking at our options there now. The rest of it really is all around Sandstone, and we're setting Sandstone up as a hub and spoke operation. So the other two projects that we have is Johnson Range to the south and Birregurra to the north. So Johnson Range is an asset we had when we listed. To be honest, it was a bit of a stranded asset at the time. Ramelius have done a fair bit of work to the south of that at Marda, feeding into Edna May. But it's just a bit further to the north. And so we've got 65,000 ounces up there at 2.5 grams in resource. Just in the top 100 metres, we stopped the resource at 100 metres depth. Well, that's still open. Below that, obviously, hence we stop it. Yeah, so that's it. We'll take that up to Sandstone. So there's about 240 kilometres of trucking, but on decent roads all the way. So it'll cost us close to half a gram to take that up there, which is no different to mining 2.5, hopefully closer to sort of 3 grams, or from down there, be no different to mining 2 or 2.5 grams right next to the process plant at Sandstone. So that'll form part of our hub and spoke operation. We've got a project up to the north at Birragrin, sort of just right on the south end of sort of that Gidgee greenstone belt. No resources up there, a lot of small scale workings up there in the past, some very, very high grades. If I could put something into Sandstone, it'd be a little bit extra grade, just a little bit of sugar on top to sweeten it up. So if we can generate a couple of little high grade resources up there, I'll be super happy out of that. But yeah, probably early stage. But like I said, lots of old, small mining up there. There's a little head frame up there and things like that. So we've got work to do to chase that up. And we're actively always looking at what we can bring into that sandstone mix and get to that critical mass that we're trying to hit to start it up. So certainly Johnson Range forms part of that now. So trying to hit that startup target. Our Johnson Range assets are part of that.
And over the next 12 months, we talked about, have you got sort of a list of priorities that you guys, from the sounds of it, Sandstone is clearly the priority, and there's probably some plans to get some exploration and stuff done?
We put out last year what our drilling plans were at Sandstone. We had a bit of distraction maybe at Mount Palmer with a large lithium anomaly. Technically, was all good. Pathfinders still don't look too bad down there in terms of actual lithium results. Were disappointing. So we've got the drilling plans out there. So we've got good targets sitting on the mining leases. The guys that had it before us, Middle Island, they had actually pretty good success there in terms of discovery. They found the Ridge, McIntyre, McLaren deposits. We've got some targets out there we think are just as good. In terms of, we've got another banded iron unit sitting to the south of Shillington. Reasonable geochem signature on there, plenty of good results from prospectors and effectively untouched. We've got a banded iron that sits to the west of our 2 Mile deposit that looks just as good as the Shillington deposit. And so we've got 90,000 ounces in resource at Shillington and effectively untested. And then we've got a controlling structure that runs through some of our better deposits and comes down to the south there in an area called Mount Klempt. Anecdotally reported some super good results from a dozer push exercise over the top of that. There's some really shallow drilling there and lots of smoke, and no one's had a fair crack at that. So that looks really interesting as well. And so keen to get into all of that. And if we can, get 1 or 2 of those to come somewhere close to what we have at Shillington, the 2 Mile for open pits, then I think we're pretty much there in terms of what we need to move forward. So, all within the shadow of the processing plant, sort of all within sort of 1 to 3 kilometres from that, on mining leases.
It's a lot of ticks.
Good targets. It's just sort of asking for it.
Yeah, no, it does. And I was going to allude to the point that, when I was doing my research, the board and the management team, own 70% of the company, which means there's a clear alignment with shareholder interests and values. And that probably leads itself into the team that surround you and, talking about the history that this was almost the second crack at getting a group of projects together and taking it through those stages. Who's alongside you in this team? And as I said, there's going to be a realignment with shareholders' sort of value and trying to progress that next level. But who's joining and who's alongside you? Yeah,
so team is really important, and I think as an exploration company, we stand apart a little bit. Like we actually have a group that can take it forward. We're not early stage explorers and not involved in running and developing companies. So, to emphasise that, and I won't go through everybody, but on the board level, so Sean Day is there with me on the board. So Sean was there as CFO at Northern Star, basically for the same time that I was there as Manager Tech Services. So a lot of overlap in terms of dealing with banks and things like that. But, so Sean's seen all that growth. Prior to that, he was involved in a company called Straits Resources, which again had a massive amount of growth and multi-mine, and that was multi-commodity company. So, huge amount of good experience there in terms of building something substantial. And then most of the guys that sort of employ are people who've been involved with before, right? So my project manager for Sandstone was chief geo out at at Jundee and then South Carl operations, and spent some time up at the Tanami when I was nominally supposed to be general manager up there, as well as doing the other stuff at Northern Star. Picked up my best resource geo out of Northern Star. We've got a really good guy for permitting, and so geo by background. Went back, did environmental, worked for the department for a while in WA, came back out, worked for me at a company called ABM and now works there. So awesome in terms of permitting. So one of the advantages of Sandstone, of course, we have all this infrastructure that still remains permanent.
Yes.
So, he's literally driving up tomorrow to do the water testing, because we've got to keep doing all that. We've got the existing tails dam, we've got to keep everything alive. So we burn a little bit more than we'd like to if we were just straight exploration, but keeping all those things in good standing is really
beneficial in the
valuable.
long run. Yeah.
Justin is awesome at all of that. Really good overall exploration guy. Who, used to look after our Southern Cross stuff, and will really now take the lead on this work that we do with MinRes. And in fact, is a long way why MinRes are going to let us do the exploration on their behalf, etc., and pay us a management fees, because we do have that team and that capacity in-house. So pretty much everybody's someone that I've been involved with in the past, one way or another. And it's been good enough to put up with me generally in some form or another. And everyone's there to try and make something substantial out of the company.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you said there about the team not necessarily need to be reshuffled as the company grows, because you see that across the board in a lot of companies as they hit certain milestones, and then there needs to be complete reshuffle because the people have never experienced that next stage of the mining life cycle, and it's that harsh reality check of, I'm actually not ready to take this next project. And from the sounds of it, your team is fully equipped and has done this quite a lot throughout time as well.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. And I think you can go back through the projects that don't necessarily work, and I think I used to I still have a list, right? And 1/3 of them, for whatever reason, I've actually seen the data, and you're able to say, no, it won't work for this reason, then it fails for that reason. 1/3 of them from public data, you can sort of see that. So I think people try and carry things too far.
They're not willing to sort of give it up and almost accept that they're not necessarily best suited for that position.
There's been some real consequences for that over time, unfortunately. Early stage, I talk about plutonic, basically sort of helping to fix up that underground and get that going. At Gidgee, we restarted the Butcherbird portal side and developed that. But then, from Mincor on, so I started at Red Ross, restarted Carnelie Hill at Northern Star. A lot of involvement starting up the Hermes open pits and Ramon open pits at Jundee and getting that going. At Focus Minerals, basically restarted the Tyndalls underground, so it evolved into just a stoping operation when I got there, and we restarted up the Countess ore body and the Empress ore body and got Perseverance cranking again and started up the open pits, Big Blow and Dreadnought and Empress. And there's some other things in there as well, but so
it's a decent resume.
For myself, there's a lot of fix up, and even at Northern Star, I went over and tried to drag Pogo for an operation that was due to shut. So when we picked it up, it was a great deposit and an awesome ore body, but the previous operator, Sumitomo, were literally shutting it. That was where it was going. So to try and pick that up and restart it and try and drag it into the current century. So huge amount of restart, also
experience,
restarting experience and fix up experience there in my sort of background. I look at Sandstone and I
can see the similar.
Pretty comfortable that we have the capacity to take that forward.
Yeah, well, just before, we mentioned a few people are part of the team, but I know a lot of people get fascinated with the board members and who's a part of the management team. So do you want to go through a little bit about some of those people, maybe by name, because I'm sure that some will instantly recognise them as well, and that's always a big tick of what people look for.
So on the board, 4-person board, Chairman Piers Lewis, who runs a business called Small Cap Corporate. So they provide a lot of back-end support to a range of ASX-listed companies, and they, via a guy called Victor Go, is our co-sec and CFO, and they do a pretty good job. And Piers is awesome from an overall market perspective and governance and compliance. And in terms of, my first gig as MD and where your skill sets are and where your background is, Pierce has been fantastic. Sean Day, as I mentioned, and Sean's always big picture thinker as well. Doesn't get, and it's good for me in terms of making sure I don't get too caught up in the small stuff and keep in mind what the overall picture was or is. And then Daniel Rahaney, who's come onto the board sort of towards the end of last year, and you sort of mentioned board and management speak for 17%. So Daniel's come on as very supportive, and his company, Seven Enterprises, is now a decent shareholder, and has been fantastically supportive as a market guy, but fantastically supportive through last year when we're getting rid of the con note and working out how we're going to do it and how we approach all of that. So Daniel's been fantastic. And then also, management team, the guys I talked about already. Yeah. Also, Mark Rowbottom. So Mark, a guy I picked up, or who really picked up the Mount Dimer assets, and I gave Mark a hand, and so we went through that listing process. Mark in his time has listed probably about 10 companies now, if you include ours, and one other thing. So, fantastic experience through there. Guys I mentioned, Simon, Justin, Shane, and Graham on the resource side, and then really just Peter, who's our database guy, and data guy who does all our images and everything like that, which is fantastic versus having to go and outsource that and pay for it. And he's the guy that just continually trawls through data, and like I said, it's the cheapest exploration we can ever do is the stuff that's already been done, and has never seen the light of day in a digital form. And Pete is someone I got involved. Who was actually involved then before I was. So he spent, 2 years before we'd even listed, fixing up the data for all of our Southern Cross assets and progressing that. And there was a huge amount of work to do.
Yeah, and if I recall from the conversation we had over the phone, everyone's based in Perth in WA as well, which is very helpful from, if something needs to happen, it's very, resolutions are found quite quickly. You don't have to worry about trying to slot in a time zone or anything like that, which is also quite beneficial from a structure and organisation point of view as well, I can imagine. Yeah,
look, absolutely. So, it means you'll get together on all the time. We make sure we have a sort of group catch up. At least once a week, as opposed to all individual bits and pieces.
Yeah. No, again, very, very helpful. And, as we've talked about, it's at the moment predominantly focused on WA. I know that the companies are always looking at opportunities around to add in or fold in. And, I'm not going to put words in your mouth there. But, of course, I like to summarise a lot of these conversations with 3 key takeaways so that investors that have now put it in their, potential trading watch list or whatever can now remember that these are potentially the 3 keys that the company's going to focus on for 2024 or the next 12 months. So, if you could jot down those 3, what would be the 3 key takeaways that we've talked about today?
Yeah, so firstly, for anybody that's looked at us before, we've obviously got rid of the con note, we've got rid of the overhang, the balance sheet's now very, very clean. We've maintained all of our resources there, so we're better and we're cheaper, and any of the doubt before should be gone. With that, though, we're still super cheap, right? I think on a EV per ounce basis versus any of our peers, WA, or locally more around that Sandstone area, I think we are a fantastic exposure for gold, and anybody that's looking for long-term gold exposure where somebody's really going to take it forward and move it forward, I think we're a really good option, and great opportunities right now on the mining list to increase that. We'll get out and we'll be drilling very soon, and so hopefully we add the news flow to that story, and that exposure continues to grow. And the third bit is, and we touched on just in terms of team, we're not a group that needs to be reshuffled. We're very focused on where we want to get to. We're not trying to build something to flog it off and hopefully we get the highest bidder at the time or whatever it might be. We're definitely focused and trying to do all the things required to take it forward to production and development, and ultimately, it should be valued on what you're going to produce, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to produce gold bars in the near term at Sandstone, and come along for that ride.
Yeah, I think a lot of investors, especially given the last couple of years, de-risking is definitely an appetite, and the con note was definitely an overhanging complication. And now, as you can see through the transaction, that has been alleviated to some extent, and there's clearly the intent to continue to dwindle that down. And yeah, it sounds like it's been a very transformative, if you throw that word around. It's really sort of realigning with the objectives of what you're trying to do. And for listeners and viewers that naturally have been a little bit interested by this story, I mean, where can they go to potentially follow the company and maybe engage with yourself and ask questions? As I know managing directors now are very comfortable with almost answering phone calls on the regular, but how can people follow and contact yourself and the company?
Yeah, so first I'd say the website aurumin.com.au, so Aurum for gold, Min for mining, and company details are there, as well as the subscribe button, and I'd encourage everyone to click on that and get on our distribution list. We do, of course, have an account on Twitter. Hasn't been as active as we'd like it to be. I expect that to sort of crank up this year. We've got more on-ground activity going again. As I would hope late March we're back out and drilling. We'll see how we go for time frame, but some good targets there, so all of that should come up. And LinkedIn, we show up as well. But number one, I'd encourage people to click the subscribe button and stay informed that way.
Yeah, it's and again, it's listed on the ASX code AUN, and you can find all the recent investor presentations and all of that on the ASX. But no, I appreciate you taking the time to speak on the show today, Brad. There's a lot happening in 2024, and it's going to be a very exciting one. So wish yourself all of luck and look forward to seeing what unfolds.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. As I said, it's been a bit of a reset and definitely moving forward now.
Thanks for listening to the Marketable podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Marketable on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.